Hey everybody, welcome to this Thursday edition of TNT Devotional. Real quick, I want to apologize for the internet mess up that we had on Tuesday. If you were along with us on that ride, I actually went to the church to the iCampus studio because the internet at my house had been suspect to say the least. And so I went to the church where there was plenty of bandwidth, and something happened there, and we went on ahead and recorded it though, just kept going and recorded the rest of the devotional and put that out there on Facebook and on YouTube. So if you didn't get to see the rest of it, it is out there now. My son-in-law, Ty, who put in my router so I can be back here in my kitchen today, he told me on Tuesday, he said, don't worry about it, because he was watching an interview with Vice President Pence that same day on Tuesday. He said, and he was being interviewed by a news organization, and he was he was at his home or his office or something, so he was going through the internet, and right in the middle of the interview, the internet cut out. So if it can happen to the Vice President of the United States, who I suppose has some pretty good internet, I certainly don't feel bad for having some internet issues here, but kind of annoying nonetheless. I appreciate your patience. If you did stick with us through that devotional on Tuesday and you went back and watched it, I gave some homework. And I said, and I'm going to check the homework. I'm going to have you put what you did into the comments today. And if you did the homework, and the homework was, serve somebody, do something for somebody else, maybe something totally altruistic, maybe something anonymous. And we're not bragging, but if you put something in there, you're not bragging. Hopefully this is going to be an encouragement, maybe stimulate some ideas for other people. Jane, can I see Facebook in a second? Facebook is glitching. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord in all circumstances. So if you can put the in the comments if you did something, and hopefully I can see some of those soon. And if you did not hear this the other day because the internet was down and you didn't get to finish the devotion, I totally understand that, but do something good for somebody else, and maybe we'll just revisit that next time, all right? Because you guys are just talking to each other in the comments, which is awesome. Glad you're here. Anyway, if you've not heard, we're going to be online only this Sunday. Here's your phone back there. Online only this Sunday. I'm so ready to be done with this season that we are in, but we are not done with this season that we are in, so we're just going to kind of roll with it. That's what our current kind of topic is for our TNT devotionals is just the seasons, talking about seasons because we are in a difficult one right now. Right now, I literally have people waiting on me to get my, oh, I see somebody saying something here. I talked to my family about wanting to take a stronger role with the Lord and being a rock for my grandkids. Love it, man. Love it. That was, let me see who that was real quick before I lose it. Pablo. Way to go, Pablo. Proud of you, buddy. Bought things for a friend in need. That's Christy Horner. Way to go, Christy. And once again, this is not necessarily bragging that you're totally awesome when you put something out there. I just think it's awesome that we're thinking and we're doing, and it's an encouragement to everybody else. So keep up the good work. I'll challenge you again today before the end, and then we can come back together, all right, and talk about it. But anyway, I literally have people waiting on me for slides for the sermon, to get things done for the sermon, slides, discussion questions, and whatever else it is that they do with my sermon. So I probably need to stay on task here. Today, what I want to do is I want to talk about friendships. Many of you know that friendships oftentimes last, for a season. Like, when you're in school, when you're in high school, you have certain friends, and they're good friends. But then you move on, and maybe you had friends if you went on to college or to the military. You had friends that were formed in those times, and maybe you had friends from your hometown that you were very close to, but then you moved away. And what I call those are friends for a season. A lot of us have had friends for a season in our life, and then that friendship changes dramatically because that season is over. And honestly, that's okay. As the friends for a season are okay. And I'm saying this right now because we're in a season that may give us a new opportunity to reach out and have some new friendships. And those friendships can be forged in a way that would not happen in normal times. And that's why I was telling you on Tuesday, if you didn't stick with us or didn't rewatch the devotionals, that this season that we're in presents new opportunities for us to try some new ways to reach out to people and so forth. And so kind of the same line of thinking here. But what I want to do is I want to talk for a few minutes today about some characteristics of friendships during difficult seasons. I'm going to use the story of David and Jonathan as a backdrop. I preached about David being anointed as the new king last week in my sermon, and that was awesome that he was anointed as the new king. The only problem was the old king was still on the throne. That's King Saul, and that made for a very rocky transition of power. But the rise of David as God's anointed was undeniable. And Saul's own son, King Saul's own son, Jonathan, could see God's hand on David. And so Jonathan became best friends with David. Best friends. And that friendship was big time tested in times of adversity that were coming. 1 Samuel chapter 18 is where we'll be for a few verses today. 1 Samuel chapter 18, if you want to follow along. And this is when Jonathan realized that God was with David. And so he just made a commitment to David. He made a commitment, which is what friendship is. I'm just going to be committed to you. And 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 3 says, Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. He loved him as his own soul. And if you look at some of the characteristics of a friend in a tough season, you're going to see those same characteristics in this story. And so that's what I want to cover with you right now. One of those characteristics that when there's a friendship that endures through a tough season, one of the characteristics is availability. In this story in 1 Samuel, Saul was the king of Israel. David was gaining in popularity. Because he was gaining in popularity, he was despised by King Saul. Jonathan, however, as we have said here, um, developed this deep friendship with David, which I might add did not please his father, King Saul, very much. But a characteristic of friendship that they had, especially from Jonathan's standpoint, was availability. He could have run away from David, and he did have to keep his distance at times, but he made himself available to David, even at the point of endangering his own life. He made sure that he was there for David when David needed it. Many of you know, perhaps, I've talked about it a little bit in church, that I grew up in Indiana. I had somebody in the comments, I can't remember where it was now. I'm taking in a lot of information and giving out a lot of information, so I'm kind of losing track where everything's coming at me from. But there was somebody, I guess it was in, I don't remember. It may have been a church post on Instagram. Somebody asked me where I was from in Indiana because they were from Terre Haute, and I am from Brazil, Indiana, about 15 minutes from Terre Haute, which interestingly enough, when, early in my life, I was in southern Indiana, where the leaves are beautiful in the fall, and I lived in a town called Paoli, and about 15 minutes from us was the town of French Lick. Weird name, okay, but go with this actual town, French Lick. And anyway, that's where Larry Bird was from. And so he started making waves way back in the day with his basketball skills. And then, so I've lived 15 minutes from where he grew up, and then moved to Brazil. And then he went to school in Terre Haute, which is 15 minutes from me again. I actually went to Indiana State University, where he did. He went before me, but Indiana State University, I went there for a semester while I was in high school. I couldn't graduate early. They wouldn't let you do that. So I went to Indiana State during my senior year of high school. So anyway, I was a fan of Larry Bird because I felt like, he was near me the entire time I was growing up. So he joined the Celtics. So I became a diehard Celtics fan for a while until God changed my heart and converted me into a Rockets fan. But I once heard an interview about the coach of the great coach of the Celtics back in the day, Casey Jones, and they were talking to Kevin McHale about the coach, and he said something about the coach that I thought was very interesting. He said, whenever I had a bad game, maybe I missed a shot at the end of the game, or we lost the game, he said the first person to encourage me would be Coach Jones. He would come up to me, he'd put his arm around me, he would pat me on the back. He would tell me, "Don't worry about it, Kevin. We got a game tomorrow night, and you're going to, instead of missing the winning shot, you're going to hit the winning shot." He said he was always there for me to encourage me, and also all the other players on the team. He would just, anytime he messed up, he would be there to encourage. But Kevin McHale said this about Casey Jones. He said, one thing I did notice, if I did score the winning basket, or I did have a great game, or something amazing happened during the game, I would look around and Casey Jones would be nowhere to be found. He said, so one day, he said it bothered him. So one day he said, I went to his office and I said, "Coach, I need to talk to you." And he said, when I mess up, you're there for me. You're putting your arm around me. You're encouraging me when I mess up. He said, but when I have a great game, he said, you're nowhere to be found. Why is that? And the great coach Casey Jones said, it's very simple, Kevin. When you have a bad game, you need me. You need me to encourage you, and to let you know that I'm glad that you're on the team. You need positive reinforcement. When you have a bad game, you need me, but when you have a good game, you don't need me at all. There are 15,000 people cheering for you. Reporters mobbing you. TV cameramen are fighting to get a shot of you. The whole team is picking you up and patting you on the back when you have a good game. You don't need me. When you have a bad game and you're left alone, you need me, and I will always be there for you. Okay, that's a good friend, isn't it? I mean, Yeah, rejoice with those who rejoice. But the take he had is when you really, really need me, I'm going to be there for you even when nobody else is. And I don't want you to take this the wrong way. I don't think you will. But every single one of us have friends that are only there when you don't really need them. You know what I mean? That's called a fair weather friend. And fair weather friends are a dime a dozen. You know, when the sun is shining on you, when life is good, when everything is going your way, man, friends come out of the woodwork. You know, they want to hang out, they want to have a party. But when, you know, the chips are down and it's a difficult season, the person who stands with you when nobody else does, that's a true friend. So all that to say this: don't be a fair weathered friend. Don't be a fair weathered friend. And I guarantee you, man, that right now there's somebody in your life. You got them in your contact list on your phone. Somebody that needs a little boost of encouragement. I I told my wife the other night. I said, you know what? I'm a pastor. I know the promises of God. I get into the Word every single day, but every now and then throughout the season, I could feel like a little flutter of, I guess, anxiety. You know, like what's going to happen here, and how's this going to work out? I can just a little bit of it, and thankfully it hasn't stayed, but I can sense it every now and then. And I told her, I said, if that's happening to me, and I'm standing on the promises of God, I can't imagine what's happening to other people who aren't standing on His promises and don't know Him. So anyway, with that said, in this season, there's probably a lot of people that you know that are struggling a little bit. And I would say don't wait for someone to text you, to call you, to encourage you. You be the one to be a friend in this difficult season. Don't wait for someone to be a friend to you. You be a friend. Jonathan was available to David when David was going through a tough season. I want you to see verse 23 of this story. Things were tough. Things were real dangerous. It got real complicated for Jonathan. He wanted to be David's friend, but at the same time, he wanted to respect his father. David, meanwhile, is running for his life from King Saul, Jonathan's father. But in 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 23, Jonathan reaffirms his friendship to David. He says this, he says, as for the agreement of which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forever, forever. Now, most of the time, oftentimes, our focus is, we talk about friendships, we're like, I don't have a lot of friends, or that person used to be my friend, but they're not anymore. So our focus is oftentimes about having friends, but Jonathan's focus is about being a friend. See the difference? He says, David, I'm going to be your friend. And it may cost me something, but I want you to know that you can count on me. I'm going to be dependable. I'm going to be here for you. He wasn't waiting around to see if he could make himself available. He made himself available. He made himself dependable, and he made himself vulnerable to David. You gotta, in a relationship, you gotta be open. You gotta be transparent. That's one of the marks of true friendship. And there was one time, and this is over in chapter 20. Again, Jonathan is sitting with his father, and Saul is incredibly upset with Jonathan. And so in verse 30, in verse 30, he says to his own son, this is King Saul to Jonathan, he says, you son of a perverse, rebellious woman. He's talking to his own son. You son of a perverse, rebellious woman. That's kind of typical of a parent, though, isn't it? If your child is acting up, it's your mom's kid, you know, or yeah, the mom's kid, your wife's kid. But a moment later, in verse 30, um, he tries to kill his own son. It says, then Saul hurled his spear at Jonathan to strike him down. So Jonathan knew that his father had decided to put David to death. So Jonathan said to himself, you know what? If my dad is so mad about David that he would try to kill me, I think David's life might be in danger. Pretty good reasoning skills on the part of Jonathan. But you see here that Jonathan made himself vulnerable. He was open even to the point of being hurt in this case because of his friendship. I believe friendship is vulnerability, that you can't be a true friend unless you're vulnerable. And I believe a friendship will never grow unless the people involved become vulnerable and transparent, which means you can't go through this life pushing people away, keeping people at arm's distance. If you do, you're going to be a very lonely person. And there are a lot of lonely people in the world. And honestly, a lot of the times it's because they have done this to other people, because they don't want people to get close to them, because maybe, I don't know, I'm not a psychologist or even a counselor, but I think sometimes people are afraid to be hurt. They're afraid to be vulnerable. They don't want any pain in their life, and so they choose to have no feelings whatsoever so that they can not have any pain. And maybe it comes from experience. Maybe we've been hurt before, rejected before. I guess a good example of that would be Jesus, betrayed, abandoned by those who are closest to him, by his good friends, denied, by one of his best friends. And if anybody understands the pain that can happen in a friendship, I'm going to tell you something, it's Jesus. And even though his vulnerability was abused, he offers it again and again because he offers his love to us. One more thing I want to make mention of out of the story, though. There's a certain level of responsibility that occurs in friendship. And it's not total responsibility, because neither person in a friendship relationship is mindless. But, there is a feeling of love and appreciation that encompasses not only you, but then it starts to have some sense of responsibility that exists for the relationship between you and another person. And that sense of responsibility would include then the well-being of your friend. That's the responsibility I'm talking about. You got a good friend, then there's this concern. You want what's best for your friend, and it goes so far as to being a place in us where if we see a friend about to crash and burn, when we see a friend making stupid choices, when we see a friend about to ruin his marriage or other relationships or lose his job because of some habit or addiction or something, that's when a true friend steps in and says, listen, we got to talk. We got to talk. And that's risky. That makes you totally vulnerable. But that's a good friend. It says in Proverbs, and I for whatever reason, I can't remember it at this moment, that the blows of a friend are better than the kisses of an enemy. Meaning, if a friend needs to say, hey, wake up, you're ruining your life, that's good. That's a good friend. Good friend will tell you what you don't want to hear. So availability, dependability, vulnerability, responsibility, those things are in this story, and hopefully they're in your life, because I'm going to tell you right now, somebody needs that from you today. I might have told you that recently I started asking some pastors from our non-denominational Christian church tribe, our tribe of like-minded churches around the Houston area. There's about, I don't know, a dozen or 16 of us. But before the pandemic, I asked them to come to lunch, and we had like 3 lunches, and pardon me. And then we've been having Zoom calls since the pandemic started. And it's been good for us to be able to lean on each other. And as I may have told you, because I can't remember everything I've said to you, but there was a moment a while back when, and we don't know each other that well, but we're all going through the same sorts of struggles right now. And there was a moment when there was like, maybe 10 guys on my screen, in one of the Zoom calls. And there was a moment when every single one of them was laughing. We were all laughing together right in the middle of this pandemic. And, it was one of those deals where you laugh because you really wanted to cry. And it was kind of one of those moments where we were all just laughing because somebody had made a joke. And I wish I'd have taken a picture of it. I would frame it and send it to every single one of them. But there's just something awesome when you can lean on people and people can lean on you as you're going through difficult times together. Much better than going through it alone. But anyway, I'm not going to divulge any specific struggles from that group because I feel like I would be betraying their trust. But I will say there is a pastor from Santa Fe who has been married for 47 years. And he reached out to us just a couple of days back and said his wife of 47 years is about to go home to see Jesus. And I have never met him personally, except through the computer screen, like I'm doing with you, although I can see his picture and we've talked back and forth. But and that's how the other pastors know him as well. We've never been in the same room together, us, the pastors and him. But I'm just telling you, there's this deep love right now. And so I, without him knowing it, after I heard about it, I reached out to the other pastors and said, man, we got to do something. We got to do something for this guy. And so, man, the ideas just started coming in of what we can do to help him and what we can do to encourage him. And, I think that it may be, I don't want to say it out loud, but as soon that she is going to pass. And the pastors in the group were saying, I'm going to her funeral. I don't care about, if we're supposed to be social distance, even if I have to stand outside of the building with a mask on, I just want him to know that we're there for him. Okay. Question. Is that valuable? Absolutely. 100%. So I guess what I'm saying, and I need to hurry up and say it so I can get to work on my sermon, but don't let this season that we're in be an excuse for being a bad friend. In fact, a bad season is the best time to be a good friend. That's pretty good, isn't it? Don't let this bad season be an excuse to be a bad friend. A bad season is the best time to be a good friend. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I pray that you would just help us, Lord. Put somebody on our heart today to encourage, to walk with. I know that every single one of us, God, knows somebody that is probably going through a difficult time right now. I pray that you would help us to help them, to give us, Lord, give us the words to say to help somebody who desperately needs it. I pray also, God, and this is a big ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Get rid of this virus, Lord. Please, God. Please. And, but don't let us miss the lessons that you have for us. during this virus, God, during this season. I pray, God, that you take care of our church family, watch over them, bless them, keep them healthy, and keep them encouraged. I pray that they have been encouraged today. And I pray this in your son's name. And all the people said, amen. Okay, so real quick, online only this Sunday. I'm going to show up in the virtual lobby at about 9:30 a.m. And I just want to chat with you because then I can really see your comments coming through both Facebook and YouTube. And I would love to just talk to you there just for a few minutes before the service starts. And then service will start at 9:45. We're going to try to end up the series, but God, hopefully I'll be able to have a sermon by then. Working hard on it. I'm on my this morning. Stayed up till past midnight last night. Got up this morning, 5:30. I'm on my 5th attempt at a sermon for this weekend. So prayers for me would be appreciated. Love you guys. Hope you have a great day. We'll see you.